There it is. Side by side. Okay.
It's like that.
Okay, here we are in Ways and Means. And it's 2:55. And it's still the 14th. And we are working on a bill with a number,
It's 9:41.
H 941.
9:44.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member Kimball.
No problem.
We're working on a bill, and Damien's gonna tell us about it. Thanks, Damien.
Sorry. Great. For the record, I'm Damon Leonard with the Office of Legislative Counsel. We were last together on this about 2 months ago when we looked at the mileage-based user fee, which is a mileage in lieu of fuel tax, as I've recently heard it called. Also a road usage charge in other states. In any event, the Senate made extensive changes to the House's version of the mileage-based user fee. And I will pull that up for you. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in the Senate's version of the bill that added fees. So they went to 79 pages from the House's 35. And that was after the Appropriations and Finance Committees stripped out 8 sections. So the mileage-based user fee starts on page 15, and let me share my screen. So the Senate began with some fairly extensive findings on the history of the gas tax. So Vermont, for those of you who are history buffs, Vermont adopted its gas tax in the same year that production of the Model T peaked. And the Model T was the dominant vehicle on US roads at that time, which essentially made the gas tax a usage tax because most vehicles got the same mileage at that time. The additional findings in here speak about how we now have a broad range in fuel efficiency across vehicles, and the gas tax no longer reflects actual usage or impacts on the roads. And in some cases, such as electric vehicles, the fees that they pay are not tied to the amount that they use the road. The actual section 16 here, which begins on page 18, enacts their version of the mileage-based user fee. Because they had an extensive findings section, they've done away with the purpose section. For purposes of the definitions, the main change that you should pay attention to is they've changed the references to battery electric vehicles to covered vehicle, or BEVs to covered vehicle, which the Senate construct includes expansion to hybrids in 2029. And so by using the term covered vehicle, you don't have to rewrite the entire chapter. You can just change the definition and incorporate additional vehicles in the future. The additional changes in the Senate, their mileage reporting period definition was added language to incorporate time between the initial odometer reading at the purchase of a vehicle or beginning of a lease to the first annual inspection. That was not incorporated in the House version. It was really an oversight in drafting that we noticed when it made it across to the Senate. And in terms of the actual mileage-based user fee, on page 20, you get into that. So the House had included what is now in A here, annual payment of the MBUF as a lump sum following the conclusion of your mileage reporting period. The Senate added back in the pay-as-you-go and estimated payment options that the House Transportation Committee had proposed and that were taken out in this committee's amendment. And it also added in a flat rate option of $178, which would only be part of the program for the first 2 years. It would be repealed in 2029 when hybrids are brought into the program.
That fee is good for 2 years.
The flat fee is good for 2 years. There is also a $178 cap. That is good for 2 years, so a maximum that you could pay. So you could choose, if you know your mileage is going to be high, just pay the flat rate and not have to worry about a bill down the road. You can just pay ahead of time. So Senator Chittenden, who reported for Senate Finance, mentioned that one of his vehicles gets about 20 to 25,000 miles a year. And so for him, the flat rate would make sense.
And are they gonna be allowed to do those 4 installments on that 178 too?
So we'll get down to the flat rate in a second here. So the pay-as-you-go option is largely the way it looked when it came over from House Transportation, where they would pay it at times and in the manner set out by the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles. So they would basically be doing periodic pictures of their odometer and then making a payment after the department tells them how much they owe. I can take questions.
Okay, Representative Woody.
I just can't imagine all the work in either the pay as you go, estimated payment options. I mean, it's got to be so much person power to get that done. Do you think that is?
That is not Damien's question, Representative.
So I think, I was going to say, I think that's a better question for the agency and the department to speak to. Yeah.
So we voted this out. It went to the Senate. The Senate sent it back with these changes. House Transportation will take a vote tomorrow on whether to go to conference or to whatever they want to do. We are staying informed, and that is our entire job here. I'm sorry I didn't say that at the beginning. Our job today is to be informed of what's going to happen in other committees.
Cheers.
So one other thing just to note before I move on to the flat rate option, which is really the big change in the Senate, is there are other change for all of these here is that you have to basically be paid up by the time you renew your registration. So before in the original House construct, there was for the annual payment, you had like 45 days after you got your bill to pay. Now they say you just have to have paid that by registration. And if you haven't, when you go to renew your registration, you pay what you owe. So the flat rate option would be you get basically a flat fee due at the conclusion of each mileage reporting period. And then you would pay the amount due before the next required registration renewal or the termination of the vehicle's registration or the sale or termination of the lease. So that's basically covering, you're either renewing your registration, you're moving out of state, and so you're terminating your Vermont registration when you register in another state, or you're selling or ending the lease of the vehicle, whatever's sooner. So there isn't a quarterly or monthly option there. It's, although there's nothing that prevents a person from, I guess, making partial payments on their MyDMV account and then paying the remainder by the time they renew their registration.
They didn't put back in the monthly or the quarterly.
Not for the flat rate.
Okay.
The estimated payment option is still there. So you can basically do an estimated payment and make monthly or quarterly payments.
And then what about sort of the year you take ownership of the vehicle or the first year of the program?
So there is a new section covering newly registered vehicles. I'll get there. Yeah. Okay. So you're not required to report your mileage to the commissioner if you do flat rate, but it doesn't get you out of having to get your vehicle inspected or do an odometer disclosure if you sell your vehicle. So, newly registered vehicles, we got there. So they get to pay either on the pay-as-you-go option, the estimated payment option, or the flat rate option during their initial year of registration. So They're basically entering into an agreement to pay the flat rate, make estimated payments throughout the year with a true up, or do the pay as you go where they're taking periodic odometer readings.
Yes.
Well, again, that's for the first year, and I'm assuming they have to make that decision as soon as they purchase. But what about the second year? I mean, I would think the same thing, they'd have to make that decision up front, right?
Yep, so the language here allows them to select a different option for payment. By providing notice to the commissioner in the time and manner prescribed by the commissioner. So the agency and department didn't have a specific timeline in mind yet, but they expect that they will by the time that this becomes an issue in 2027. And so this allows the commissioner discretion to basically say, provide 30 days notice before the end of each reporting period if you want to switch payment options for the next reporting period.
Sorry, can you,
So
putting in statute that's not decided yet?
what's that?
Are we putting in statute that they don't understand how they're gonna implement yet?
I think that's probably not the
Okay.
fairest way to say it, but
Sorry.
it allows the commissioner discretion to set the time and manner of providing notice that you want to switch payment options.
Okay,
So, yeah,
you're right, that wasn't fair, thank you.
yeah. So calculation of the fee is the same as it was before, 1.4 cents per mile traveled, calculated based on the difference in the odometer readings from the start of the period to the end. So it works out to $1,400 per 1,000 miles traveled. So you can do the math pretty quickly after that. And even when we get to the credit system that is being added in 29, it's still only two calculations that you have to do, and then you do simple subtraction. The cap is provided here on page 25, lines 16 to 18. So that provides that no mileage-based user fee would exceed 178. The exempt, yeah,
Sorry, can you remind me the part of the expanded registration fee for EVs, how much is that?
yep, $178 for a 2-year registration. 1-year registration is 89, and that's on top of your registration fee.
This is 1 year max 178.
Yeah,
All right, you're fine.
so,
Back.
and it's worth noting that that's that 178, the estimated average or the expected average is about $154. So it's just slightly above the average. The average mileage is estimated at about 11,000 and 178 is about 12,700. So there's not a huge difference there between the two. Oh,
Oh, sorry, Representative Nelson.
Thank you. Did the committee take testimony or figure out about vehicles that should be covered under this, but they're registered in another state? I mean, I see there's a transition part in this that describes something that seemed, it might apply to registered vehicles elsewhere, but I'm just curious if there's a loophole.
so there was discussion of the issues of folks who have chosen to keep their registration in another state for
Sure.
whatever reason.
Yeah.
But are currently residing in Vermont. Ultimately, that doesn't incorporate into this. There are already enforcement mechanisms.
Okay, as long as they're covered somehow. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that your colleagues next door just closed one of the loopholes for fraudulent temporary registrations where folks are doing an online temporary registration.
We
and
just
then
heard about that one.
getting-
Right?
Yeah.
Yesterday?
So that won't get to the folks who keep their registration in Nebraska but move to Vermont. Because I mean, honestly, the scenery is just way better here. But yeah, it won't address the enforcement of that, but that's still a potential.
Good enough for now.
Complication.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
how can you maintain your registration? If you're living in Vermont, that just.
So you're not supposed to.
Right.
Once you establish residency in the state, and your car is parked at an address in the state, you're supposed to get it registered, but there are vehicles, where you will see them parked for quite a long period of time. You know, someone who's moved to the state, their kids are enrolled in school here, but their car is still registered out of state. So it's at that point, it's really a law enforcement issue. And you are legally required to get your car registered here, but folks will keep their cars registered in other places, even though they're essentially residing here. So,
What else?
Unless you're in the military or something like that.
yeah, but it's not an uncommon practice across the country. Frequently, people will leave their car registered at another address that had cheaper insurance rates or something like that.
It's also like when you move, it like can take a really long time to get all your stuff straightened out.
Yeah.
too.
And
Really
yeah, there can be a variety of reasons. You do have a grace period after you move to the state to register. But after a certain period of time, you're supposed to have been registered and get a Vermont license, et cetera.
Do they have like longer multiple year registration?
Other states or I don't know if there are any states that go beyond the 2 years that Vermont does. But I mean, I'm sure I could find out, but off the top of my head, I don't know of any. I think generally, there's a requirement for licenses and you can go out to, I think like 4 years or something like that with a license. Some states may go a little longer.
It'll bring us back.
Yeah,
Language in front of us.
yeah, sorry, I can go into the
I know you
weeds.
can, and we are also like, at the end of the day, everyone wants to leave before their cars get trapped here, because there's a race coming, so let's keep our focus on
I was
the.
gonna tell you a story. If you want to.
No, nope, not today, tomorrow. Okay.
Your story is good, Davey.
Damien, let's.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I will note that it seems to be a tradition that on the afternoon of the corporate cup, I'm in Ways and Means.
Really?
Yeah.
I can remember multiple years.
Damien.
Yeah. So this one,
Stop at the
Yeah.
door.
all right,
It was 1998. Going into your race uniform.
Carolyn,
But.
stop.
I remember that year too. Okay, so the remainder of that section is unchanged from the House version. The reports required is essentially the same as the House version. One thing that's worth noting is the Senate got rid of the interest on unpaid amounts. So the House had interest on unpaid amounts capped at 1 year, the Senate got rid of it. Their sense was that the default rate and the ability to deny renewal of your registration was enough of a penalty and enough of a stick to encourage people to pay. So the default rate, though, did change in the Senate. In the House, it was set at 98%. Well,
It's back. It just, we've become used to it.
you guys should have better equipment up here.
We're fine. We're also not gonna talk about that, guys.
Okay.
Keep on going.
So the default rate in the House was the 98th percentile of vehicle miles traveled, which came out to 375. The Senate put it at the cap of 178. And this is if you failed to file some sort of mileage report that's required, including getting an inspection. And then the other thing the Senate added is that if you've been assessed the default amount at renewal of registration, so you get to registration, they don't have the mileage reports. They show it's open. They say, in order to re-register your vehicle, you have to pay the default $178 flat fee. At that point, the driver under the Senate construct, if they go within 90 days to get their vehicle inspected, and it shows that they would have owed a lower amount, they get a credit for that difference on their next fee. So they'll go into the system and they can get, like a $15 credit against their next mileage-based user fee. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, so no refunds, but there will be a credit in the system. The suspension and refusal of registration has stayed the same. Again, if you don't pay the amount due, you can't re-register your car.
I'm gonna, we'll hear more about this when Joint Fiscal joins us, but the agency got a grant, federal grant a few years ago. And we're already anticipating all this happening when they set up their new IT system.
Yes, so this is incorporated into the IT system. So I've skipped ahead to page 31, the initial transition provision for the Senate. So in the House, the transition provision applied to cars that are already registered in the state on December 31st of 2026, so before the program goes live. The Senate's construct applies to both newly registered vehicles and already registered vehicles. The bottom line is that if you register your car in 2027 or 2028, you'll be assessed a flat road usage charge of $89 for a 1-year registration or $178 for a 2-year, same as you would pay now in your EV infrastructure fee. That amount is applied to your first mileage-based user fee due. And then if you registered your car before 2027, but you did a 2-year registration or even a 1-year and it covers your first mileage reporting period, again, that amount that you paid for the infrastructure fee gets applied to your first EV infrastructure fee. So that's how they're basically addressing the potential gap in revenues, is charging a flat rate that then gets credited. So they will see lower revenues initially. Logan can talk to you more about that, but they are getting revenue into the system continuously. And during those 2 years, I believe, just make sure. Right, so you can either do the annual mileage-based user fee option, so they calculate it at the end of the year, or the flat fee option. So they gave 2 options for that initial transition into the program. Section 19 just requires AOT and DMV to do public outreach, education, and feedback. This is already required under the terms of their federal grant, but the Senate wanted to add in the language to require that it happened in the full breadth that they wanted, particularly feedback on how the system is working and what the user interface is like and how it could be improved. The Section 20 requires AOT and DMV to submit a transition plan for the expansion of the program to all light-duty motor vehicles by 2031. I want to pause right there because the only thing that is required to come into the program within that period under the Senate construct is hybrids. But the initial proposal from Senate Transportation included first, more efficient regular internal combustion vehicles. And then in 2031, all vehicles under 10,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating, which is essentially your manufacturer's maximum weight rating for your vehicle. So that's your vehicle fully loaded, what they say it's safe to drive at. And it's printed on the inside of your driver's side door in all vehicles with it's on the federal label that's inside your door.
So just to be clear, what the plan is going to articulate, it's how you fairly allocate fees in hybrids, given that you don't know how much is driven on gas versus electric.
That is, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
So the plan is required to provide additional payment methods, including how to track miles driven out of state so that you can just bill for miles driven in Vermont. A system of fuel tax credits for vehicles that also use gasoline or diesel fuel, so that they're not paying more than other vehicles for the miles they drive. And then they also have to analyze possible ways to charge different amounts based on fuel types and weight and vehicle size. lay out a plan to incorporate the hybrids and efficient vehicles in 2029, and then light-duty vehicles in 2031. Consider other possible methods to account for out-of-state vehicle miles traveled. And then evaluate the eventual potential to include medium and heavy-duty electric vehicles in the program that aren't paying for diesel fuel. And then also consider fund revenue sustainability, carbon reduction targets, et cetera. There are 3 reports that come out of this. The main one is next January, with the initial plan to expand it to all light-duty vehicles by 2031. And to provide the alternative options for tracking out-of-state miles. That will also include recommendations on whether to retain the flat rate, which is proposed to be repealed at this point. Recommending a cap, whether there should be a cap or a maximum fee rate. And then in 2028, first in July and then in September, they're required to submit a plan as part of their grant to the federal government. So we're requiring them to provide a draft of that plan in July and then the final version of the plan in September. So that's the planning. However, as I mentioned before, the expansion is only to plug-in hybrids and mild hybrids, which are non-plug-in hybrid vehicles. So that occurs in 2029. As part of that, in section 22, the mileage-based user fee is updated to incorporate a fuel tax credit. So the way this works is first you calculate what your mileage-based user fee would be if you didn't get any fuel tax credit. Then they look at your mileage divided by your EPA combined fuel economy, figure out a rough estimate of how many gallons you bought, and then multiply that by the Vermont gas tax or diesel tax as applicable for your vehicle. And then they subtract the first amount, what your mileage-based user fee would be if you didn't buy any gas, from the second, and or subtract the second amount, your estimated gas tax paid, from your mileage-based user fee if you didn't buy any gas. And then the difference is the mileage-based user fee due. So just to give you a sense, we figured out that for a Toyota Sienna that does 22,000 miles, gets 35 combined miles per gallon, it's a mild hybrid. That vehicle, its mileage-based user fee, if it didn't get any credit, would be $308. But after you subtract the gas tax paid, which is roughly $200, it would be about $109. So they still end up paying $308, the same as an EV that drives 22,000 miles, but it's split out between the estimate of the gas tax and the remaining mileage-based user fee.
This is for just plug-in hybrids
Plug-in and mild hybrids.
and mild.
Yeah. So the Sienna is a mild hybrid, and you would see pretty different amounts depending on what you get or what you have. And the reality is, if you'll excuse the pun, your mileage may vary. Because if you are a plug-in hybrid owner and you do lots of miles near your house, you may buy very little gas. So you'll still have a relatively low mileage-based user fee. If you are a hybrid owner who does a lot of city miles, you'll buy less gas than a hybrid owner who does a lot of highway miles.
You mean mild, MILED, right?
Mild hybrid, yeah. So yes, MILD, like mild hot sauce.
Oh, really? No.
I mean, it's not where it comes from, but it's mild in that it's not a plug-in. I don't know why they call it mild, but that's.
It's not with an E?
TikTok.
No, it's just MILD.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so the bottom line is they're required to have a fuel tax credit in place. The And that's set out from pages 40 through 44. And then because of the elimination of the cap, the default rate is increased to $375, which tracks what the estimate was in the House's original construct for the penalty rate. And then that is the end of the mileage-based user fee. I'm gonna just scroll through really quick to make sure I don't have any other fees in here for you. No, I think that is it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your time. I'll
Thank you for your time.
wait for Logan.
Thanks, Wade. Logan.
So for the record, Logan Newberry with the Joint Fiscal Office. There should be a fiscal note on the committee page. This reflects what came out of Senate appropriations. There were a couple changes that happened on the floor, specifically the section expanding it to more vehicles, the hybrids, and also the gas tax credit was all added on the floor and is currently reflected in this draft of the fiscal note. So I've not had time to go through those sections. But the sort of core of the MBUF program is here and unchanged as it came out of Senate appropriations. So there's 2 pages here of words essentially explaining what Damien just walked you all through. The payment options, the 4 payment options, the transition periods in the beginning to get vehicles on. And then I'll just stop on the sort of fiscal impacts of this section and try to explain it here, and then if you have questions, we can dive into it. So essentially, because of the payment options, the variety of ways people can pay, they can sort of pay when they first get the bill at the conclusion of the thing, or they can wait until they register. These all sort of cause forecasting it to be a little tricky. There's also then the transition period. So as Damien mentioned, for the first 2 years, because before a vehicle completes its first mileage reporting period, its first 2 inspections, it'll pay at its registration $89, as it currently does. If you're a battery electric vehicle, you'll pay an additional $89. And then once you sort of get your first MBUF payment, that money will be credited, right? So in FY27, no one will have completed their first mileage reporting period. So most vehicles will be paying this $89 fee, and that's where you get this 600,000 from. This is the same as the loss of the current EV infrastructure fee. If y'all remember, this was discussed when we talked about the bill here the first time. There's currently the $89 that they pay. Once the mileage-based user fee is enacted, that fee is repealed. So those will sort of balance out. Where the potential for the zero, and I think this might not have been the intent and maybe just overlooked with the flat rate option. So in the transition period, vehicles have the ability to pay the $89, or they can sort of opt out of it and do the flat fee or the flat rate. If they choose to do the flat rate, that bill won't be charged to them until the completion of their first mileage reporting period. So there is a scenario, and I think this will need to be probably fixed if I understand the intent of the committee, that in the first year when you go, you can say, I'm going to pay the flat rate fee, not pay anything until after, well, until your second inspection, at which point you'll get charged the whatever it is, $78. And then you'll have until your next registration to actually pay that fee. So I think intent of the committees were to have it everyone paying the $89. I think it was overlooked. So there is the possibility that people all choose to take this flat fee option and therefore aren't paying anything until fiscal year 28 at the earliest.
But they would still be sort of paying in full regularly.
They would.
Their state would just have a revenue gap.
Right, yeah. So they would have to pay eventually at the end. You just wouldn't, you'd see a revenue gap in FY 27 until their payment actually comes due.
And despite all the attention, this is a fairly small amount of the T fund that we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, it's less than 1%, so. Fiscal year 28, you're still sort of in this transition where some people will be paying the mileage-based user fee and it's whatever is calculated based on mileage. Some people will be paying the $89. The first mileage-based user fee will receive the $89 credit. So that's where you sort of get this in-between revenue. And then in fiscal year 29, we expect all people to have at least completed one mileage reporting period. And then based on whether it's sort of the flat fee or the actual mileage user fee based on miles driven, we get between 1.8 and 2.9. Subtract that from the estimated loss of the EV infrastructure fee to between $300,000 and $1.2 million. Then in 29, it doesn't go out from there because, as you all heard, it is proposed to be expanded even more vehicles and to add this fuel tax credit, which adds another layer of analysis to it, which isn't included in this fiscal note currently. The other thing I will mention, this was the same as in the House bill, I'll just mention it briefly, the EV infrastructure fee for battery electric vehicles is going away, but there will still be the one for the plug-in hybrids, 44.5 per year. And Section 17 will send that money, instead of going to ACCD where it currently goes for charging infrastructure, it'll just go into the T fund. That is another sort of fee change that will be occurring there.
Yes.
So under any of these calculations, I know it's only 2 years, but is there any adjustment for additional EV vehicles coming online?
So that is a potential, and sort of this bottom paragraph sort of makes note that these numbers could fluctuate based on the adoption rate. So we do expect EV's adoption rate to continue and sort of increase in the future. So it'll likely, this will be a growing number. Also based on market conditions, it could fluctuate. There's also potential fluctuations based on average miles driven. If people start driving a lot more or a lot less, that'll change how much money we actually generate. That is a factor in this. Yeah, this sort of assumes a conservative EV growth rate given the current market and atmosphere around EV incentives and the such. So
Thank you.
So the floor amendment, it was a floor amendment for the hybrids?
yes, I believe so. Or a change to the Senate Finances amendment that they changed on the floor.
So substitute.
Substitute amendment.
So the originally Senate Finance had proposed to strip out the expansion of the program. And after further discussions between Senate Transportation and Finance, they put in a substitute amendment that expanded to just hybrids in 2029.
Shouldn't that have then repealed that second EV infrastructure?
So that's something that was noted after the sides.
And you said that when you were sitting there, didn't you?
I did not.
Oh, good,
I was
okay,
actually
good.
Just thinking that,
Okay,
yeah, so
Okay.
that's something that was noted after the
Okay.
sides agreed to the amendment.
okay.
The expectation is that that will need to be addressed, but you can either do it before the end of this session or do it in the cleanup bill next session.
Okay, thanks, Jimmy. Yeah,
Is there anything related to electric motorcycles?
That's a great question for Damien. This applies to electric motorcycles as well.
Yes, they are considered motor vehicle.
Great, thank you.
good question, good chance. Okay, any other questions for Logan?
E-bikes? No, e-bikes are not motor vehicles. Not under our statutes, they are vehicles with motors.
I'm gonna see no further questions for Logan and thank him for his time.
Well,
Damian,
I did omit one thing from the bill. So, in section 55, there's cleanup language that was proposed by the Public Utility Commission. Historically, they had oversight of railroads and could grant railroads an exemption from income taxes if the railroads were in dire financial straits. The authority, the proposal in the bill is clean that up by transferring that to the commissioner of taxes. It takes existing law and it substitutes commissioner of taxes from Public Utility Commission, but I can pull that language up for you if you'd like to look at it.
yeah, who knew they had that authority and why does anyone have that authority? That's crazy.
Oh, boy.
So,
Thanks, Damian. So fun.
no problem. Sorry, I forgot about that in my initial run through.
Seriously. Some hot stuff.
And section what, 55?
55.
It should be soon.
Okay. Yeah. They're gonna switch this right up.
And so Chris has remembered that the EV infrastructure fee has language in there that provides a contingent repeal on the implementation of the above.
We were clever once.
Yes, although we should, yeah, we were clever ones. My predecessor.
You're clever too, Damian.
Big shoes to fill. So, anyway.
Can you go on to the beginning of the next page?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. So, the main change here is, yeah, so the language provides, I apologize, that upon written petition of the railroad, setting forth that the financial condition of the railroad is such that the payment of any taxes would imperil the continued operation of the railroad and would be detrimental to the general good of the state. Under current law, the Public Utility Commission shall fix in a time and appearing. What happened here?
This the version
Yeah.
that passed the Senate?
Apparently, that'll have to be cleaned up in conference.
What's supposed to happen?
So much for the other cheaper. Get some units.
I feel it, I feel it.
Yeah, let me find the actual. I'm gonna stop sharing with you for a second and find the actual law.
Representative Muslim?
Yeah, while Damien's looking at a break, I'd like to add a historical anomaly concerning federal government railroad tax that you all find amusing, but we'll wait to appropriate on.
Thank you, because we are going to leave here today.
All right, so this is under the corporate tax law in Title 32.
Are there other things in corporate tax law under Title 32 where we give people authority to waive taxes for the good of the state?
I am not the attorney who would know that. I mean, we could research that. I'm not sure. Title 32 is rather large. But
Time next week.
the floors are long, yes. Shall fix in time for a place for a hearing thereon and give due notice thereof, including notice to the Attorney General, who shall attend the hearing and represent the interests of the state. So, yep. And then 8395. This actually would need to be updated too.
Okay.
So this was a request that was put in by the PUC. And then it would allow for the suspension of the tax upon executive order of the governor, but for a period of 1 year. And then the governor can extend that period on a year-by-year basis. It was last amended in 1961. And then there are additional sections 8396 through 8398. So, yeah.
It's a city where it's like your picture, sorry.
So,
Not
yeah, well, so the steamboat companies was repealed in 2006.
Thank you.
We also have telegraph companies repealed in 1997. So I don't know what the repeal provisions covered. But it does seem to provide that there are 5 sections dealing with petition and hearing for relief from taxes. It includes if there's
Are you sharing your screen?
no,
Okay.
I'm just summarizing. If there's a financial reorganization of the railroad, the state can waive claims for unpaid taxes.
I changed my name to Railroad.
That is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So the state basically looks at a reorganization plan if there's a bankruptcy, and will participate in the plan there and then there's a process for the Public Utility Commission with the governor to approve the plan. And then the waiver or compromise can be revoked if the railroad ceases operation. This got very limited testimony on their other side. It came in at the last moment. Well,
I'm so excited.
they've been asking for it for over a year, but have not gotten much time, and the Senate included the language at the last moment. But this did not get, I apologize, I should have thought the other sections here, and I did not. So,
Thank you.
but yeah, so it may be that there's a need to do a further look at these provisions.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I just sent an email to you and Kirby about us looking at these provisions.
I don't know what sort of vehicles we have.
I think we have this bill here.
Okay. So the one thing I want to note is that because we're at the point here where it's requesting a conference committee or sending a proposal of further amendment,
Yes.
that could complicate how all of this goes forward.
Yes, I will talk to Chair Walker about it.
Yeah, we may want to talk with the House Clerk as well
Yes.
about whether it would be permissible to add those other sections because they relate to the first section,
Yes.
or whether that's outside what we can do in a
That
conference.
sounds good. I had a somewhat similar technical correction that I just talked to both John Bloomer and Betsy Ann about, and they were okay with that one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the corporate